Hey, what's up? This is your girl, Vida Guerra, and thank you for tuning in to Heaven with Vida. I have my good friend, Klairkia. You want to say hi?
Hi, everybody.
And so we have this special guest calling all the way from London, author of a book. Do you want to chime in? And hello?
Do you want me to chime in now?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. sorry.
I know. I was like freestyling it, and this is how it's going.
Yeah, no what? Yeah. So my name is Habeeb Akande. From London, England, originally from Nigeria, and I'm the author of the book Kunyaza: The Secret to Female Pleasure. And I just want to say thank you to Vida for inviting me on your show.
Yes, we're so happy to have you. So today we're going to talk about the book and female pleasure. And I'm sure a lot of women out there are tuning in, and men as well.
I was like, men need to be tuned in also.
So tell us a little bit how you got started with the book. I mean, you've been an author for a long time. Maybe give a little background before we dive into the book.
Sure. So by profession, I'm an accountant, which is not the most interesting job in the world. But my side hustle is like I write books. So I've written 6 books in total, mainly non-fiction, on the subjects of race, history, and erotology, which is basically the study of sexual desire and the art of lovemaking. And I've written 3 books on erotology, one from an African Arab perspective, another book written about erotology from an Islamic perspective, and then my latest book, which is Kanyaza, which is looking at erotology, like the science of ancient sexual practices, but mainly looking at from a Eastern Central African perspective. So yeah, so my interests are quite wide, but it's my main interests are race, history, and erotology, and looking at like understanding female sexual pleasure and traditional sexual practices.
Yeah, this is actually what is needed now in today's world, because especially, I don't know how it's over there in London, but over here people are just having sex, and people are not being fulfilled, and it's not coming from a sole purpose. And people are just like kind of like emotionalists, right? And it's just like going through the motions, and they're not really getting anything out of it. So we talk about it here on the show, how to reach the orgasm, but not the orgasm that everyone has reached.
Yeah, no, I understand. I think I agree with what you're saying, because especially when we look at the issue of sex and sexuality, especially from looking at female sexual pleasure, there's a lot of misinformation, misconceptions, and a lot of myths surrounding sexuality and sexual pleasure, especially looking at it from the female perspective side. And I think, again, people are free to do whatever they like and things like that, but I don't think, although many people are having sex, I wouldn't say that a lot of people are having fulfilling sexual lives. And I think there is a lot that we can learn from the ancients, from the people from the past. A lot of those traditional texts, whether it's from ancient India, ancient China, from the ancient Arab world, even in parts of Africa, there are a lot of things that I think even people in the modern day world can learn. And that's why I've been fortunate enough to come across a number of sacred texts and sacred traditions, and I think I'm just trying to revive it, and hopefully there's something which the modern people can learn from the wise people of the past, because I think they had many answers that we're kind of seeking today, in terms of like, not only in terms of how to have an orgasm, but in terms of how to have a fulfilling love life with your partner, kind of thing. So I think there's a lot we can learn from the people from the past.
And so, like, let's speak about that. Like, how people that are listening, how can they have a fulfilling love-making life with their partner, based on, like, the old way of how they were doing things and creating something new?
I think ultimately what it comes down to, as much as a lot of people seem to be obsessed with connection, techniques and orgasm and ejaculation, people are thinking about the end result. Whereas a lot of the people from the past, before you're thinking about the end result, you need to have a connection with your partner. It's all about having a connection first and foremost, whether that's in the form of obviously committed relationship, marriage, what have you. But I think first and foremost, that's one of the most important things, that you've got a connection with your partner. You're compatible as well, because you could be two individuals who could be nice, and you can be attracted to one another, but you might not be sexually compatible and also emotionally compatible. Because I think one thing which the people of the past, which I think they were much better than us, is that they were more patient in terms of trying to understand each other's bodies and understand what works for each partner, both from the male perspective and the female perspective. And rather than being quite individualistic and selfish and thinking about your own pleasure, it's all about, okay, for the people from the past, was all about trying to understand their partner's pleasure and trying to make sure that they have a fulfilling experience as well as they do, kind of thing. So rather than thinking about my main purpose from this sexual session, for example, is for in order for me to have an orgasm, is know how can we both mutually enjoy this exchange, kind of thing. So I think they were very focused about mutual pleasure, and the ultimate goal with many of their practices, whether you're looking at the Taoist tradition, whether you're looking at the tantric sex tradition, whether you're looking at the Kunyaza tradition, it was the ultimate goal was pleasure, as opposed to the orgasm or the ejaculation in and of itself. Whereas I think when we look at today's society, we just seems to be obsessed with like I said, like the end goal, whether it's ejaculation, orgasm, what have you. Whereas they wasn't as concerned about these type of things. I mean, if it came, it came. Like if ejaculation came, if orgasm came, that's fine. But ultimately, I think it's all about trying to create a fulfilling sexual experience where both parties can enjoy each other's company, kind of thing. And I think one of the ways which, again, many of the traditional sources mentioned was about having like this mutual this connection between two partners, whether it's in the form of, like I said, a sexual exchange, whether it's in the terms of forming having a long committed relationship, but it's about being compatible with one another. And again, that generally only happens with time and exploring each other's bodies and understanding what each other's partner's needs are.
Yeah.
I have a question. This is Klairkia. I wanted to know specifically what prompted you in regards to the female aspect of it. Like, how did that come about for you? What made that such a curiosity and wanting to explore that topic?
Okay, I'm gonna be honest. I've got an ego, not as much of a big as ego as I had when I was in my teens. I'm in my mid-30s now, but I was always someone that, and I'm not saying it's a good thing, but this is a trait that a lot of men do have, is that you want to pleasure a woman and you get some satisfaction from that. And again, I'm not saying it's not necessarily a good thing, because someone could argue that am I trying to pleasure a woman for her sake or my own sake, kind of thing. But that was the kind of the environment I was brought up in, and it was something which, again, having discussions amongst some of my male friends, again, I'm not to say that every woman that I had relations with, I was able to satisfy them completely, because that was definitely not the case. But I was someone that was always wanting to learn from the female perspective, because I know in terms of for the man, it's very easy for me to experience gratification, whereas I know that with women, it's not that easy, kind of thing. And again, having relations, and not only physical relations, but speaking intimately with a number of like female friends, I knew that this was an issue that many women weren't pleasured. And I was fortunate enough to have a number of open-minded older relatives, female relatives, who would speak about this issue, like in terms of the inability of a lot of women to experience climax, why a lot of women fake it. And I had a number of, like I said, older women relatives who were schooling me about sex and sexuality, and how, as a man, it's your job to pleasure a woman. Now, again, I'm not going to lie. Initially, I was coming from a selfish, egotistical standpoint, because I thought, okay, that will make me feel more of a quote-unquote man. But then as I matured and, in my mid to late 20s, then I was actually interested in I was interested in learning about ancient sexual traditions which taught about these subjects, because one of my frustrations is that in the Western world, it's taught as if the sexual revolution of the 1960s discovered female pleasure. They discovered the female ejaculation. And even the G-spot, which everyone knows about the G-spot, that was quote-unquote discovered in the 1950s. So for me, it was like, are we trying to say that before Dr. Grafenberg found this area in the woman's genitalia, which surprisingly a lot of women's part of their genitalia is named after a white German man, which is problematic, but I'm not going to go into that. Before that, is that as if we didn't know about the female anatomy. And like I said, there were many traditions in ancient India, ancient China, in parts of Africa and parts of the Arab world, where they spoke at length about the importance of pleasuring a woman. And being a Muslim and from the Muslim tradition, there is a rich tradition going back 600, 700 years where men are told that it's part of manhood, it's a part of your obligation to satisfy your female, your wife. So again, in terms of from a cultural perspective, from a religious perspective, the onus was always on the man to ensure that his wife is pleasured in the bedroom. So for me, it was normal. But then just having discussions and speaking to a number of people, and again, just from what I'm seeing in the media, where people, like, you've got a lot of articles where people are talking as if they've just discovered that women can have an orgasm, or women are multi-orgasmic, and women can have all of these great experiences, when this was something that was mentioned and written about hundreds of years ago. And especially, obviously, being of African descent, one of my frustrations was that the work and the contribution of particularly of African women who spoke about the importance of sexual pleasure in relations, many people wouldn't speak about it because they wasn't aware of it. So we're aware of the contributions which the ancient Indians made, the ancient Chinese made. Obviously, we know about the Kama Sutra and things like that. But if I were to ask people what about the African people's contribution towards sexuality, not many people are aware of it. So I think it's important that, again, because a lot of traditional African countries were oral traditions, not many of their practices were documented. So again, not many people are aware of it. So that's why I thought, especially when I came across the Kunyaza tradition, I thought, okay, it's important that, this is documented and preserved before another people kind of, write about it and then they make it out like they kind of discovered it, which again, I just had some issues with that. So for me, it's about trying to preserve ancient traditions, which I think are beneficial, and hopefully people can benefit from it, and ultimately eradicate the stigma surrounding female ejaculation, because as I'm sure you both know, like, there's a lot of myths or misconceptions around female ejaculation. Many people think it's urine and things like that, whereas a lot of women who's experienced it, they know it's not, because it's their lived reality. But for a woman who's never experienced ejaculation, I can understand why she might feel that it doesn't exist or is urine, and because of the misinformation that she's been taught from maybe a young age and what she's been conditioned to believe, when a lot of women are at the point where they feel that they might be able to ejaculate, because they've been told that it's urine, they hold back and are not able to actually enjoy this this gushing experience kind of thing. So I think it's about educating people, and again, it's not about educating only children. I think adults need as much education as children kind of thing. So there are a number of reasons, but ultimately it's trying to raise awareness about Kunyaza, to highlight the contributions that Africans, particularly African women, have made towards female sexuality and sexual pleasure, because I don't think they get the credit they deserve. And ultimately, again, to help maybe people have more better, fulfilling, like, love lives. Hopefully, that's in a nutshell what.
Yes, and that's needed. And I don't know how it is in the UK, but like over here, like pornography is huge,
Right.
and people and kids and young adults are looking at this, and their expectations or what they think sex is, because basically everyone's just following what they see, right, and what they make popular. They think that that's the right way, but that's not always the way.
It's the it's the same thing when I've talked to friends of mine, and I'm like, I know that in we hear it in songs and hip hop and pop culture, as like beat the pussy up. And
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, no, it's not made for you to beat it up. I don't know who told you that, but
Yeah,
it's not a punching bag.
yeah.
Don't do that.
And then play with music that is at a 440 frequency, which is in disharmony with us, and then that programming beat it up. Exactly. Then this is the result, that women are not being satisfied.
They're not. And then one of the things that I've always said has been, when in this Western world, I can't speak to others because I don't live there, but in this Western world, when men are born, it's literally they're born into an atmosphere that says, this is your penis, this is what you do with it, it's yours, you can share it, you can hold on to it, you can play with it, you can do whatever you want. When a female is born into this Western world, she is told, don't let anybody touch you, you're going to call you a hoe, they're going to think that you're not this, and you can't do anything until you get married.
Mm-hmm.
So do we not understand that we're creating an imbalance from day one?
Yeah. I mean, that happened to me. Like, my parents, my mom was 16 when she married my dad in Cuba. And, you know, she was a virgin when she got married. So my parents' expectations of me were the same thing. And when I had my first boyfriend and I finally did have sex, then I had a block with it because I felt like I was doing something bad and wrong. And then I wasn't getting pleasure because I have a blockage. Exactly.
Yeah. You put the shame on top of that. It creates a block, and then it's a disassociation between yourself because your body feels one thing. Just as teenagers, that's what you go through. You have these emotions that are coursing through your veins, and you feel it on a physical level. But then on a mental level, your mind as a woman is being told this is wrong, so why does this feel so good? So you are out of alignment between what your body is telling you feels amazing and what your mind in the story that has been given to you is being told you should not do that. So then we wonder why there's so much trauma and abuse, or why, and not to say that this is the specific reason, and I want to be very clear, but why women are being taken advantage of in a sexual way. It's because there's so much repression seeped in there that it has nowhere to go. It has to have an outlet. And it's also why a lot of, you know, even going into that conversation is another conversation with victims of sexual assault, not realizing how your body as a woman reacts. Your vagina will lubricate itself to protect itself. So a lot of women will have climax in a rape situation and not understand it. How does this happen when I know I don't want this? Well, your body has created a defense mechanism to automatically lubricate itself so that you don't get hurt on a physical level because mentally you're already being taken advantage of. But when we don't talk about the female body and how it responds and how it reacts naturally, just on a natural basis, we create all of these stigmas attached to it, and then there's no freedom in your expression. So I applaud you for approaching this. This is something that, even as someone, and I consider myself, you know, kind of a sexuality savant, Kunyaza is not something I'm familiar with. So
I know. I want to know more. Yeah, so please tell us more because now I'm like...
I was like, please tell us a little bit about what you put into the book because Kunyaza is, you know, new to me. So I want to hear from you as the author, like, what are some of the principles and concepts?
Okay, so the technique itself, Kunyaza, is derived from a word in one of the Rwanda languages called Kunyara, which basically means to urinate or to ejaculate. The technique itself, it's a heterosexual technique in which a man uses his penis head to stimulate the woman's clitoris and labia minora and labia majora in order to facilitate female ejaculation and hopefully orgasm during the sexual encounter. Now, the way he stimulates the woman's genitalia is through a number of methods. I mean, whether it's like horizontally, circular movements, or zigzag movements. Now, the actual technique itself is not that special, but it's about what it's trying to achieve, which is ultimately to enhance female pleasure, which hopefully could lead to whether ejaculation or orgasm. Now, because a number of people ask me, okay, what's so special about this technique? The technique itself, like I said, it's not that it's distinctive from any type of masturbation, mutual masturbation, which a man might perform on his female partner. But the importance of it is that because the man is involved with the woman, and obviously he's using his genitalia, it's teaching men to be patient. It's also teaching men to prioritize his partner's pleasure over his own. It's also teaching him to try and explore her body with him. So again, it's a technique which is about mutual pleasure. It's not just about the male pleasure. And then touching on the point which Vida mentioned earlier about pornography, and this is something again which I think has affected a number of both men and women, but men in particular. When a lot of men think about sexual pleasure or sexual acts, 9 times out of 10 we're thinking about the actual act of penetration itself, the jackhammer approach. And for men, because that what gives us the most pleasure, we think ultimately that's what's going to give the woman the most pleasure, because obviously the performative scenes that they see in pornography, which again is not real, but again that feeds our misunderstanding of what sex is about. But coming back to Kunyaza, because it's a practice again, like I said, which is it's a non-penetrative technique, which it focuses primarily on the clitoris and stimulating the clitoris. It's a technique which is ultimately, it's all about trying to seek enhanced pleasure for the woman, kind of thing. So it's very female orientated. And again, one of the things which I found really intriguing in terms of Rwandan culture. Rwanda is a country, it's a very small country of 13 million people located in East Central Africa. And one thing I found, which I touched on in the book, not only the technique itself, but it's the culture of the of the East African people, because many of the hang-ups which you mentioned earlier, about which maybe some women do have, and maybe that's what prevents them from enjoying sexual relations and ultimately achieving pleasure, is because, again, like I said, some mental hang-ups and mental blocks that they've got. Whereas from my research and speaking to a number of female sex educators known as Sengas in Rwanda, a lot of the body issues that maybe some women have, a lot of the issues like in terms of women having agency of their own body, women's right to sexual pleasure, it didn't really exist, because they were taught from a young age that women are sexual beings just as much as men. And if anything, women have a right to pleasure, and again, whether this is linked to male ego or not, in their culture, men wasn't seen as real men unless they're able to satisfy their wife. And again, it's very different from what we understand about, male female dynamics in terms of sexual pleasure in the Western world, where generally it's all about male pleasure, it's all about the jackhammer approach from pornography and things like that. Whereas in Rwanda, which is, I would say the technique is similar, and it's been described as like the African tantra, where, as we know with tantra, ultimately it's all about slow sex. It's about intercourse, but again, it's about slow penetrative thrust, because ultimately that's what hopefully we could give both partners enhanced pleasure. And similarly with Kunyaza, it's the actual technique again is supposed to be rhythmic, like how a person will play with the drums, but it's not like you have to do a certain way. It's all about just exploring the woman's genitalia, obviously with the man, in order to enhance her pleasure. But for me, like I said, one of the aside from the technique itself, it was about the culture of Rwanda and Uganda as well, where it's also practiced, because their mindset was very different compared to maybe how we see sexual relations in the West. And another thing that which I wanted to touch on, which I mentioned in the book, in addition to the Kunyaza practice, there's also a practice called gukuna, which is labia elongation, which they practice in parts of Rwanda, Uganda, and Kenya. And women from a young age are encouraged to elongate their labia, basically by stretching their labia minora. And the purpose of this is in order to increase skin to skin contacts during penetrative sex, which hopefully would enhance the pleasure for the man and the woman. Now, this practice of labia, this practice of labia elongation, and the reason why I find it remarkable, because when we look at the Western world, and again, this is because of pornography, a lot of women are a lot.
Yeah,
to cut it off.
Exactly, the labiaplasty surgery, which is very popular in America, the UK, and Australia. It's one of the most commonly sought after cosmetic surgeries in the Western world. So, and again, this idea that a lot of women want to have like what is called a Barbie doll vagina, with the lips that's intact. Yeah, but that's what it's called. The cosmetic surgery is called a Barbie doll vagina, a Barbie vagina. And again, a lot of that is linked to pornography, because a lot of women's view of what a quote unquote perfect vagina or vulva genitalia looks like is from what they're seeing in pornography, and that's a problem. Whereas again, in parts of East and Central Africa, a lot of women were proud to have like elongated labias, and there wasn't as much of a shame attached to their genitalia as there seems to be in much of the Western world. So again, in terms of like a lot of body confidence issues, which I know unfortunately many women suffer from in parts of the Western world because of porn and the media, and even some male partners, unfortunately, there didn't seem to be that much of an issue in parts of East and Central Africa, because again, like, that was something that I was shocked by, because again, it wasn't, like I said, just the technique itself, it was the sexual culture or the sexual history of the Rwandan people. Unfortunately, I mean, the Kanyaza practice has been exercised for hundreds of years since like the 16th century. But after the Europeans, primarily the Belgians and Germans, colonized Rwanda, they told the Africans at the time, the Rwandans, that this type of practice is barbaric and they should stop doing it. So again, this is another one of my issues, that like a lot of the traditional practices, whether it's in Africa, whether it's in the Arab world, whether it's in Asia, many a times it was the Europeans that came in and said like you should stop doing these barbaric practices, and then 100 years later they're like, oh, we've discovered you can pleasure a woman by doing ABC. Do you know what I mean, kind of thing. So for me, it was just like, okay, we need to sidestep what we've been taught, because a lot of what we've been taught by our colonizers was inaccurate, and we should kind of go back to our that which is beneficial. That is, again, I'm not saying we have to incorporate all of it, but that which is beneficial we should take from our like ancestors, who kind of left a legacy which was rich and fulfilling, and I had a lot of the answers which many people, like I said, now are kind of searching for.
Yeah. I think it's also something that you said prior that is very important. And I think a lot of people misconstrue it because we've been taught that the body needs to be covered up all the time. Yeah. We allow babies, when they're about up until 6 months old, we let them run free naked and they're happy and it's cute. And then they get to a certain age and we're like, no, boys have to cover up, girls have to cover up. And what you do when you do that, when you're not around human bodies to see them on a regular basis, it does become where you turn to media to get the understanding of the human body. Instead of it becoming the aspect or the understanding that let kids play together, let them see each other. Because when we continuously cover up human bodies and make it where it's only this, we become desensitized to then when we do declothe or derobe, then it does become, oh wait, I'm comparing you to that movie I saw, and that girl was naked, and I really liked her, but you don't look like her, so something's wrong with you. And it's like, no, it's just another variation of a human body. But because we don't see the human body out in the open, we are making comparisons to unrealistic ideals in visuals that are not effective. And so it does become a thing where then personally you get shamed because you don't get the reaction from a partner that you thought you were going to get when you take off your clothes. Because they're comparing you to a movie they saw, and you don't even know that they'd have never seen another woman in their life.
Yeah, it's just crazy. It seems like, this is what makes you wonder. Because we know how powerful sex is, and especially doing it with two people that are really in love, how you can manifest and create. You create a human being, for God's sake, so there's a lot of power in that.
Create worlds with sex.
So withholding it from the world, right, and making it seem like it's something bad, or it just creates something for people to be.
It's the greatest genius move ever. Yeah. It's if you want to keep a humanity in darkness, you prevent them from sexual liberation. It is the great, honestly, I see the genius in it, to be quite, I can't help but laugh and to think of the amazingness and the profundity that has been created around colonizing continents, countries, and regions. Because it is the most amazing thing. And on the other hand, we can talk about colonizers all we want to, but at some point in time, all people of color bought into it. So we are just as much to blame.
I agree.
Absolutely.
I wanted to get your thoughts on something which I want to get your thoughts on something. The idea that, or what do you think about the idea that in order to be sexually liberated, you need to have many or as many sexual partners as you want? Because that's something that I'm hearing a lot, and I've got some pushback with that, because for me, and this is something which I found from some of my studies, was that you can be sexually liberated and be celibate or be in one relationship. Do you know what I mean, kind of thing? But I just think there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure on both men and women alike. It's not just women, but that this idea that you need to be sexually liberated, which is all well and good, but it's like the idea, the notion of being sexually liberated is having multiple sexual partners. When for me, you can be sexually liberated and you know, it all comes down to choice. Yeah, so and that's something which I've noticed that's now coming out a lot. That this idea that because I'm sexually liberated, that I have multiple partners. When my understanding is that you can be sexually liberated, but it's who you want to have sex with. If you don't want to have sex with anyone, if you want to be monogamous, if you want to be polygamous, that's up to you. But this idea that you need to have multiple partners to be sexually liberated, I think that's something which
that's what
is
they're trying
dangerous.
to feed right now to the young
because
ones.
it's another way to repress.
Yeah, it's another way to repress. And it, you know, because we talk about it all the time on the show about energy, and like every time you're letting someone in, you're mixing that person's energy into your energy, and it's actually creating. It's like, okay, yeah, you could be liberated. It's go ahead, but it's really actually working against you.
It is because you're still here. Here's the thing about it, and I've spoken about this countless times on my Instagram live when people have asked me these questions, and they ask, because I'm celibate right now. Okay,
that's good.
So, and I have had the most sexual liberation in my past year of celibacy than I ever have in my entire life. And I consider myself to be a very sexually liberated woman. But I will say this: if you are in any way, shape, or form carrying shame with you in your sexual chakras, you are exchanging that energy with also people who have sexual repressed energy in their chakras. So you are not liberating yourself in the way of authenticity. You're liberating yourself just exchanging negative energy with people. So that's not liberation. That's actually more suppression. But you think that you're liberated because you're saying to the world, I don't adhere to your ideology, so therefore I must be liberated. It's all an act. It's all a ploy. It has to start with your own self-awareness, as with anything in life, is what is going to gravitate toward you and magnetize toward you is who you are. So you can have somebody who is disassociated with themselves, thinking that they're liberated, sleeping with 5 and 6 people, going around spreading that, or you can have a person who is self-aware and finds 2 amazing partners to take them to climax, and that's their version of liberation. Or in the case with myself, being very clear on what I desire and finding the most pleasure within my own self-love sessions. And I have the most amazing climaxes by myself than I know half the women do in LA. So I think that is a myth, and I think that it goes into understanding yourself. If you don't have self-awareness, you will be just as jacked up with one person as you can be with 10.
Yep.
I agree with that.
No, and you will be worse with 10.
I agree with that 100%. I agree with that.
You know, when I did a 1 year of celibacy, and that's when I was the most liberated that I've ever been in my whole life. Because I made the vow to myself, and I stayed within that, and I didn't let anything. And then after that, it's kind of like it's so easy.
Yeah. Well, I say that as well. I think that everyone should go through a bout of celibacy, meaning don't exchange fluid with another person, but learning yourself. Because when you become very immersed in yourself and you learn what really pleases you, it's very easy to discern when you meet someone whether they can or cannot. Because you've taken the time out with yourself to learn yourself emotionally, physically, as well as spiritually. And when you take that time, you begin to recognize really early who's for you and who's not, just by the energy they carry. You no longer have to spend time or waste time to see, is this going to go somewhere? Is it not? Because you're listening and you're tuned into a different level. It's not just about getting off anymore. Now it does become about, in the Kunyaza way of that, being able to connect and being able to see if this person really can even turn you on just by talking to you.
Yeah, that's deep.
Absolutely.
That
is it. If any young girls are listening, like, definitely listen to this, because it's so important. And I know that society is telling you, oh, just be free and just have sex. And no, that's not the way, but baby girl, that's just digging a deeper hole.
It's just masking it even more so.
Yeah.
It's another way that the media can spin something to take you out of your power. True power is being able to walk into a room knowing that everyone wants it and there's no price that anybody can pay to get it. That's power.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like
If you have a
that.
price, if you have a price that you can attach onto it, how powerful is it?
Exactly.
You can be bargained for. If you can be bargained for, that's not value. You can't walk into a Lamborghini dealership and bargain for that shit. Come on, but you can bargain for a Honda. You can bargain for a Cadillac. But the high-end cars, you can't bargain for those. The price is the price.
Yeah.
You either got it or you don't.
No, I agree with that.
So,
That's powerful stuff. That's
Women
powerful
stay
stuff.
in their power.
I think from a male perspective, one of the things which I'm not going to say I'm fully where I should be because I'm still a work in progress, but
we all
it's like coming from the Western world, I do agree with what you're saying, but it's like we're taught that which is kind of crazy. We celebrate strength and being powerful in all aspects, but when it comes to sexual restraint, we praise men who are weak, who are sexually weak, who can't control their desires. So like if there's an attractive woman that a man is maybe talking to, maybe platonic friends or what have you, he's expected, especially if she's interested, to sleep with her because he's supposed to give in to his desires. Whereas in all aspects of life, we praise someone for being strong and to be able to in all aspects. But again, like I said, when it comes to sexual desires, as being to sexually restrain yourself, for some reason I don't know why, but men in particular, again I'm not speaking about all men, but generally, like, we're encouraged to kind of like, if there's an attractive woman, you definitely should sleep with her. How could you not sleep with her? And I think that's another form of like miseducation or some part of our culture which kind of need to change, because like you both said, it is kind of destructive to your soul, or whether you believe in chakras and things like that. But I think conversations amongst men, because a lot of men, and unfortunately a lot of men will say the right things, what they need to say in public, but behind closed doors, and again especially when we're in safe spaces amongst men, we kind of encourage each other, pat ourselves in the back to give in all the time to our sexual desires, when even though we know that it might not be for our own best interest long term, kind of thing. So I think that's something which again needs to change, but again it does take a while.
I read something today that was very interesting to me, and it said, there are so many men who are heterosexual who believe that because they have sex with women, that's what makes them heterosexual. But if they really sit and think of who they bond with, who they talk with, who they spend time with, who they actually ask for advice for, who they look up to, who they hold space for when they're angry or what have you, it's men. So is that really, are you really heterosexual because you sleep with women? When, in all honesty, most of your conversations that are intimate are had with other men.
That's deep.
I thought so too.
Yeah.
Or the men that degrade the women and treat the women bad, like, in the pornos that you slap a woman, like do all these things that are degrading women. Under that, is something else.
Exactly. So it's like you claim yourself to be heterosexual because you have sex with women, but who really holds space for you intimately are your boys. So what you really saying? You know what I mean? And it is something to think about, because I think it is imperative, like with my male friends, I know what good men look like because of them. And I feel like they understand what a good woman looks like because of me. And those friendships are important. Those platonic friendships, because not everyone who is attractive to you do you need to be romantic with.
I agree 100%.
There are connections beyond that.
But here, like if they're a person, if you're attracted to the person, then it's like, if it's a man and a woman, then all of a sudden,
it's like, oh, you're sleeping with her?
You're sleeping,
Actually, we're just really good friends. Like, we respect each other, we love each other, we spend time together. We've never even, done anything past a hug. Like, how is that such a foreign concept for you to get?
Yeah.
And I've coined them, my male friends, they are my warriors. I say every goddess needs her warriors, and every man needs his priestesses to speak life into him, to breathe into him, to give counsel to him. We all need those people.
Yeah. No, that I agree with that, and that's something that, again, I'll be brutally honest with you, because that's something which, again, because of the nature of the work that I do and things like that, when I'm having discussions with my male friends, obviously in private, one of the first questions is, "Oh, are you trying to sleep with this woman? Are you trying to sleep with that woman?" I'm like, "No, I'm speaking about my book. I'm promoting my book, or this, that, and the other." And the mindset, again, unfortunately for a lot of men, is that you can't have a platonic relationship with a woman that is attractive without you trying to have an ulterior motive. And like what you said, I do agree that it's important both for men and women that you've got friendships with people of opposite sex. It definitely helps me anyway because I get a different perspective. But again, for a lot of men, we're kind of just taught that you can't have a female friend because we're so weak. And again, we've bought into that when I don't agree. Like this idea that if there's an attractive woman, you can't resist her. You're gonna have to try and make a pass at her. Which I think if you've got a bit of self-respect for yourself, you can control those desires, and you won't even have those desires because you look at her a different way, kind of thing. But for whatever reason, a lot of men were kind of taught that you have to give in to those desires because that's what you're supposed to do as a man, which is crazy.
It is, and there is the aspect of self-respect, and I do know, and I've told a lot of women that I know, whether or not that man treats you as a friend or makes a pass at you, that's your decision. Mm-hmm. And the reason why it always is the woman's decision is because she sets the tone. Whether we realize it or not, relationships emotionally are always set by women because we are the emotional carriers. If you want to know the true leader of a relationship emotionally, it's her, not him. Every single time. Because that is our job. That is our role. He is to lead in protection. He is to lead where you go physically, but emotionally, that's her job. So if a man decides to take advantage of something, you let him do it. Mm-hmm. A man will only do to you what you allow him to.
Yeah.
With my male friends, there have been a few that have, in the beginning of our friendship, have tried, and I've been like, no, I am not for you in that way. You can either walk away from me and never see me again, or you can be my friend. Decide which one, but I'm telling you now that will never happen. Mm-hmm. And do you know what? 9 out of 10 of them have stayed. Mm-hmm. And the 10th one regrets it. Mm-hmm.
Bye-bye, Charlie.
You know? So I really do. It is a conversation that has to be had and people need to see healthy platonic relationships. Mm-hmm. Because if we don't see it, we don't know.
Yeah, and it needs to be talked about more. So like, it's amazing that you wrote this book, and I feel like I don't know if you're doing this, but you should have seminars for men.
I would love to have you a part of a couple of the events that I'm doing. With because you're needed. Your voice is needed.
Yeah, I'll be more than happy to. I mean, I haven't done any. I've done a couple. I was in the States last year. I was in where was I? I think Michigan. There was a session, a very interesting session we had about toxic masculinity, and I was part of the panel with amongst 3 other men. And also I gave a presentation about one of my books about A Taste of Honey. But one of the questions which one of the audience members asked, which it did struck me, and I'll tell you what she said. She said she was asking the men, what do they do again? Sorry, let me remember. Do you remember there's a film, I forgot what it's called, with Denzel Washington and Viola Davis? It's a powerful film. I can't remember. I forgot what it's called.
Oh, Fences.
Fences, yeah. So he showed a couple of clips and they wanted to, get our intake in terms of is this examples of toxic masculinity, this, that, and the other. And then we had a bit of the discussion. And an audience member, she raised her hand and she asked, why is it that a lot of men, especially African American or black men, can understand the concepts like white supremacy and racism, but when it comes to sexism and toxic masculinity, you're up in arms. And I'll be honest, all 4 of us we were dumbfounded. We were quiet. I mean, it took me a while to kind of process what she was saying, and also, admittedly, it was because a lot of times we men were the perpetrators of it. So it's difficult. The same way a lot of white people can't understand or don't want to accept the concept of like racism and white supremacy, because not to say they are racist or white supremacists, but generally, obviously, white people are the perpetrators of racism and white supremacy. That's the same way with men. So that's why when as men, like, although these discussions are important to have, there will be a lot of pushback. And we had a session after where it was just amongst men, which I was fortunate enough to be a part of and lead one of the discussions. But it took about half an hour for people to really say what they're truly feeling. And then some of the conversations, like, and I understand why they wanted to make it male only, because when we was in that space, they were being honest with each other. But then there was other people who correct and say, okay, why is it that? I mean, this is why maybe that type of attitude is problematic, because a lot of men, admittedly, and I'll speak about myself first and foremost, I do question: do I actually really respect women as much as I should do? Because examples where maybe when I was younger, going out, if I'm interested in a woman, I'll go and approach her. Again, this is not now, this is years ago. She says she's got a boyfriend. I might still think, okay, I can still try and make a move. Only when her boyfriend were to come into the scene, that's all of a sudden when I'll step back and I'll apologize to the man. And again, that's something which happens a lot, but then it's like, okay, are you really respectful of the woman, or is this because you think she's a property of another man? And I think that's something which a lot of men, unfortunately, you've got this problematic ideas in terms of how we view women, and I think it does need unpacking, and it needs to be challenged, because it's not this idea that it's not until you have a daughter or a sister that's when all of a sudden you understand what is it like, to protect women, kind of thing. Because you do hear that a lot, that people will say, oh, I've got a daughter, as if because you've got a daughter now you can understand why women should be respected and treated well. So up until that point, you can call women bitches, hoes, you can degrade them. But now you've got a daughter, all of a sudden you've got this new sense of respect for women, which again, I just think that that's problematic in and of itself. You shouldn't wait until you've got a daughter, like I said, to kind of respect women. So it's something which as men we kind of need to deal with and have these conversations amongst ourselves. But yeah, it's just something that I think definitely needs to be had, and have honest conversations as well. And I think where most men will have those honest conversations is generally when they're kind of like in a predominantly male environment kind of thing. Because when you've got a woman there, what would generally happen, not against with all men, but some, is that they will try and act up in front of the woman, or they'll say the right things in order to impress the woman, kind of thing. And they're not being honest with themselves. Ego, exactly.
In their authenticity.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. And if people are interested in getting your book, where can they find it, and your other 5 books?
Yeah, so it's on Amazon. So if you just type in Kunyaza, or type in my name, Habeeb, surname Akande. Other books are also on rabah.com. That's RABAAH.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, and we'll keep in touch, because we're going to be thinking of different things, because I think the information that you have should be given to a lot of people. It will help a lot.
Thank you for inviting me.
You're willing to be so honest and open and transparent about your own journey, and to admit where you were and versus where you're going. A lot of men need to hear that part as well, understanding that it's a process. We're all kind of deprogramming ourselves from this westernized concepts of what we've learned that don't serve us anymore. So thank you so much for being that aware.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for having me.
And then also give your social media handles, so if people want to follow you and get more information or reach out to you, they can do it.
Sure. So my Twitter and Instagram handles is the same. It's Habeeb Akande, HABEEB AKANDE. So that's Habeeb Akande, HABEEB AKANDE.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And that's all today with Heaven with Vida. Thank you, Klairkia, to give your handles. People want to get.
Oh, yeah. So you can look it up under Klairkia _ the artist, which is spelled KLAIRKIA. Again, that's KLAIRKIA _ the artist.
And thank you guys for being on the show.
Thank you.
And make sure to check us in every Tuesday from 3 p.m. and 11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Thank you.
Thank you.